Yeah, come on. Sweet harmonies that once serenaded a generation, the platinum plaques that lined his walls, the adoring fans who screamed his name. Kyle Norman had it all, the voice, the fame, the fortune. But beneath the spotlights and behind the smooth vocals that helped define an era of R&B, darkness was brewing. "I'm tired of running from myself," he once said in an interview. Little did we know just how prophetic those words would become.
Okay, I'm gonna read a police report. The police report says that you punched her face, choked her, and at one point tried to get her to swallow her engagement ring.
How does a man go from singing love songs that became the soundtrack to countless weddings, to being led away in handcuffs, charged with choking his fiancée and shoving her engagement ring down her throat? What demons drove one of R&B's most recognizable voices to such a violent breaking point? And now, as prison doors slam shut behind him, what happens to the legacy he built? This is the raw, unfiltered story of Kyle Norman, his meteoric rise with Jagged Edge, his catastrophic fall from grace, and the long, painful road that led to a prison cell. Some call it justice. Others call it tragedy. I call it a warning of how quickly everything you've built can crumble when the spotlight dims and the person in the mirror becomes your worst enemy. From Atlanta's booming music scene to the cold concrete of a prison cell, this is the rise, fall, and uncertain redemption of Kyle Norman. Atlanta, Georgia, February 26, 1976. While the rest of America was celebrating the nation's bicentennial, the Norman family was welcoming a baby boy who would one day help reshape R&B music. Kyle Norman entered the world with music already flowing through his veins, though no one could have predicted just how high he would soar or how far he would fall.
All right, I'm back with R&B singer Kyle Norman from the group Jagged Edge. Now, in January of 2015, he was arrested for assaulting his now wife, Marika. Marika, what's your memory of that night?
The Atlanta that Kyle grew up in was transforming into a cultural powerhouse, a city that would eventually birth legends like Usher, TLC, and Outkast. The sounds of the streets were changing, and young Kyle was soaking it all in. I remember hearing Boyz II Men for the first time and thinking, that's it. That's what I want to do with my life, Kyle once recalled in a 2003 interview. Their harmonies just hit different. I'd lock myself in my room for hours trying to match those notes. While other kids were playing basketball or video games, Kyle was training his voice, participating in school choirs, and dreaming of the day his name would be in lights.
Because, you know, being in church, the church and choir, and then the youth choir, and that's when I noticed Brandon Bryan. And Wingo's in another youth choir, so.
Music wasn't just a hobby. It was his escape, his identity, his future. By his late teens, Kyle had developed the smooth, soulful tenor that would one day captivate millions. But talent alone doesn't guarantee success in the cutthroat music industry. He needed the right opportunity, the right team, the right moment. That moment came in the mid-1990s when Atlanta was cementing itself as the new epicenter of Black music.
We're good. When I became the congressman in 1972, I said there's some special things happening here.
The city was hungry for fresh talent that could represent the South with pride. And Kyle Norman was ready to answer that call. But he couldn't do it alone. Enter twins Brian and Brandon Casey, two talented songwriters and vocalists who shared Kyle's vision for creating R&B that balanced street credibility with romantic vulnerability. When they connected with Kyle and fellow vocalist Richard Wingo, the chemistry was undeniable. Jagged Edge was born.
A new cultural phenomenon that is really, truly all-American.
We didn't want to be just another R&B group, Kyle said in a 1999 interview with Vibe magazine. We wanted to create music that would still be played at weddings and anniversaries 20, 30 years later. Music that would become part of people's love stories. Little did he know that while their music would indeed become timeless, his own story would take a far darker turn.
Were you injured? What were the injuries?
Yes, I was injured. Black eyes, he choked me, golf-sized knot. Of course, my engagement ring, I don't have that. I still don't have a ring.
To be honest with you, Steve, all I just know that I just caused harm to her. I know I hit her. I know I was on top of her.
The music world was changing. The shiny suit bad boy was in full swing. The raw energy of death row was still reverberating, and into this landscape stepped 4 young men from Atlanta with matching outfits and harmonies tight enough to make boys to men nervous. Jagged Edge's debut album, A Jagged Era, hit shelves with modest expectations, but quickly exceeded them. Their first single, The Way That You Talk, got them noticed, but it was I Gotta Be that made the industry take a serious look. With its heartfelt lyrics and Kyle's emotional delivery on the bridge, I Gotta Be climbed the charts and gave Jagged Edge their first taste of nationwide recognition. But this was just the appetizer. The real feast was coming. In 1999, Jagged Edge dropped J.E. Heartbreak, an album that would redefine their careers and cement their place in R&B history. The album's lead single, Let's Get Married, wasn't just a hit, it became a cultural phenomenon. Let's Get Married was everywhere. Radio stations, music video channels, clubs, and most importantly, actual weddings. The song transcended being just a hit to becoming a cultural touchstone, the rare track that could make both grandmothers and gangsters nod in approval. Following it up with Promise, Jagged Edge proved they weren't one-hit wonders, they were crafting a legacy. Kyle, with his distinctive voice and charismatic presence, was becoming a heartthrob, the kind of star who made fans scream and faint at meet and greets.
When I walked in that part, they was on that stage. The first thing I thought was like, "Damn, we look good." Then I started,
Wait, that ain't me.
I'm down here.
The album went double platinum. The tours sold out. The money flowed. It was a crazy time, Richard Wingo later recalled in a 2018 interview. We couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. People would be singing our songs back to us in the mall, at restaurants, everywhere.
Luther, just even finding out he was a fan of ours was such a it's like getting an award almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Or probably better than an award.
Listen,
And Kyle, man, he soaked it all up. He loved the attention. Perhaps too much. As the 2000s rolled in, Jagged Edge continued their hot streak with hits like Where the Party At, featuring Nelly and Walked Out of Heaven. They were collaborating with hip-hop royalty, performing at the biggest venues, and living the dream they'd imagined back in Atlanta. For Kyle Norman, this was the pinnacle. Grammy nominations, multi-platinum albums, world tours. The boy who once practiced Boys to Men songs in his bedroom was now sharing stages with them. But success at this level comes with pressures that few can understand and even fewer can handle.
I was just too far gone at that point. I was just out of my mind, delirious and just hurt, pain, neglect. And I felt like, I wish he just would have held me.
The constant travel, the industry politics, the temptations that lurk in every VIP section, the slow erosion of privacy and normalcy. Fame changes you, Kyle admitted in a rare moment of candor during a 2012 radio interview. And it changes everyone around you. Suddenly, you don't know who's real anymore. Who's there for you versus who's there for what you can give them. As the decade progressed, the cracks in Kyle's foundation were beginning to show. There were missed appearances, slurred interviews, arguments with group mates that sometimes spilled into public view. The music was still flowing, but behind the scenes, something was unraveling.
In the beginning, he was trying to get that relationship going, and I knew I totally blew it. So I understand exactly how he felt. I would have felt the same way.
By 2010, industry insiders were whispering about Kyle's increasingly erratic behavior. The stories varied: heavy drinking before performances, explosive arguments with management, concerning interactions with women. What the public didn't see was a man struggling to reconcile his public persona with his private demons. The loving lyrics he sang on stage were increasingly at odds with the turbulence in his personal life. The fall was coming, and when it came, it would shock even those who had seen the warning signs. Every fall has a beginning, a moment when the first domino tips. For Kyle Norman, that moment wasn't captured on camera or documented in the press. It happened quietly in the spaces between the spotlight as fame began to corrode the foundation of who he was. Success was like a drug. A former tour manager who worked with Jagged Edge between 2008 and 2012 told us, requesting anonymity. And Kyle was hooked on it. When album sales started to dip, when younger groups started taking their spotlight, he didn't know how to process that. The music industry can be brutally unsentimental. Yesterday's hitmakers quickly become today's nostalgia acts. For groups like Jagged Edge, who had dominated the early 2000s, the shifting landscape of R&B in the 2010s presented a harsh reality. As bookings moved from arenas to smaller venues, as new singles failed to capture the magic of earlier hits, the pressure mounted. For Kyle, whose identity had become so intertwined with his status as an R&B star, this slow fade from relevance was devastating. Friends noticed changes. The charismatic, confident performer was increasingly replaced by a moody, unpredictable presence. Small slights would trigger disproportionate anger. Alcohol, once a social lubricant, became a daily necessity. He started pushing away the people who would tell him the truth, said a childhood friend who remained close to Kyle throughout his career. He surrounded himself with yes men who enabled his worst behaviors because they were on his payroll. This isolation created a dangerous echo chamber. Without honest feedback, without genuine connection, Kyle's perspective warped. His sense of entitlement grew while his grip on reality weakened. By 2014, those closest to Kyle were deeply concerned. There were incidents, arguments that turned physical, dangerous driving, blackouts, that suggested a man spiraling out of control. His relationship with his fiancée, which had once seemed like a stabilizing force, became increasingly volatile. Friends described a toxic dynamic of jealousy, control, and reconciliation that played out in an endless, exhausting cycle. He'd buy her expensive gifts after they fought, one friend recalled. Jewelry, handbags, trips, as if material things could erase the emotional damage. It was a pattern that just kept escalating. What few understood was how deeply Kyle's sense of self-worth had become damaged. As his star faded, as younger artists claimed the spotlight he once owned, his ability to process frustration in healthy ways deteriorated. The warning signs were all there, for those willing to see them. The mood swings, the paranoia, the increasing isolation, the substance abuse that had moved from recreational to dependency. But no one, not even those closest to him, could have predicted just how catastrophically things would implode in January 2015. The night that would change everything was approaching, and when it arrived, it would transform Kyle Norman from R&B star to infamous headline in the most devastating way possible. January 29th, 2015. A date that would forever alter the trajectory of Kyle Norman's life and legacy. The headlines were shocking. Jagged Edge singer Kyle Norman arrested for brutally attacking fiancé. The details were even more disturbing. According to police reports, officers responded to a call at Norman's Atlanta home around 5 a.m. They found his fiancée with visible injuries, a large knot on her forehead, bruising around her neck, a cut on her nose. What she told police painted a horrifying picture of domestic violence at its most extreme. Norman had allegedly punched her, choked her until she began to lose consciousness, shoved her engagement ring down her throat, and threatened to kill her. When police arrived, they found him running down the sidewalk. The mug shot that circulated showed a different Kyle Norman than fans recognized. Disheveled, hollow-eyed, the polished R&B star replaced by a man who looked broken and dangerous. The public reaction was immediate and fierce. Fans who had once sung along to his love songs were now confronted with the jarring dissonance between his art and his actions. How could the same voice that crooned, "I gotta be," commit such violence against a woman he claimed to love? For many, especially women who had found solace in Jagged Edge's music, the betrayal cut deep. "It felt personal," said Tasha Williams, a longtime fan from Chicago. "Their songs had been part of my wedding, and then to hear what he did, it was like finding out a family member was a monster." The music industry's response was swift. Radio stations pulled Jagged Edge songs from rotation. Planned appearances were canceled. The other members of the group released a statement distancing themselves from Kyle's actions while expressing shock and sadness. As more details emerged, the picture grew even darker. Friends came forward with accounts of previous concerning behavior. Industry insiders admitted they'd seen warning signs but had looked the other way. In the days following his arrest, Kyle released a statement through his attorney. "I am embarrassed and saddened by what has occurred. My actions were inexcusable, and I apologize from the bottom of my heart to my fiancé, my family, my group mates, and my fans. I am seeking help for my issues and am committed to becoming a better man." But for many, the apology rang hollow against the severity of his actions. Kyle was charged with aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and making terroristic threats, felonies that carried potential prison sentences of several years. His fiancée, showing remarkable courage, spoke publicly about the incident and her decision to press charges despite their relationship. "I loved Kyle, but love shouldn't hurt. I'm speaking out because I want other women in similar situations to know they deserve better and that they have the strength to walk away." As the legal process began, Kyle was released on bond with strict conditions: no contact with his fiancée, regular drug and alcohol testing, and anger management classes. The man who once commanded stages in front of thousands was now shuffling through courthouse corridors, head down, voice silenced. He pleaded guilty to family violence, aggravated assault, and received a 15-year sentence, with 10 years probation and 5 years suspended. The terms were strict. Complete a 90-day family violence intervention program, undergo substance abuse treatment, perform 200 hours of community service, and at the time it appeared Kyle was embracing this chance at redemption. He checked into rehab, began attending therapy and anger management classes, and spoke openly about his struggles with addiction and anger. "I had to face myself in rehab," Kyle said in a 2016 interview. "I had to look in the mirror and admit that I had become someone I never wanted to be. The fame, the money, the lifestyle, it all distorted my perception. I started believing I was above consequences, above the rules that govern everyone else." This period of apparent transformation saw Kyle speaking at domestic violence awareness events, working with youth programs to steer young men away from violence, and slowly attempting to rebuild his reputation. "I can't change what I did," he told an audience of young men in 2017. "But I can use my story as a warning. I can show you how quickly you can lose everything you've worked for when you let your demons take control." For some, these efforts seem genuine, a man truly grappling with his actions and committed to change. For others, particularly advocates for domestic violence survivors, his public redemption tour felt premature and self-serving. Whatever progress Kyle had made, however, would soon be tested. Adhering to the strict terms of probation proved challenging for someone accustomed to the freedom and excess of celebrity life. In 2018, reports emerged that Kyle had violated his probation multiple times, missed check-ins with his probation officer, failed drug tests, and unauthorized travel outside the state for performances. Each violation brought him closer to serving the suspended portion of his sentence. Each misstep chipped away at the redemption narrative he'd been carefully constructing. By 2020, as the world grappled with the global pandemic, Kyle's legal troubles were mounting. Court appearances became more frequent. Warnings from judges grew sterner. The leeway he'd initially been granted was evaporating. Then, in late 2022, the final straw. Multiple serious probation violations, including a positive drug test for cocaine, missed mandatory counseling sessions, and failure to pay court-ordered restitution. In January 2023, a judge revoked Kyle's probation and ordered him to serve 3 years in prison. A devastating blow for a man who had once narrowly avoided incarceration and had been attempting, however imperfectly, to rebuild his life. As Kyle was led away in handcuffs, the journey from R&B star to prison inmate was complete. The man who once sang about eternal love and devotion was now facing years in a prison cell. Time to reflect on how far he had fallen and whether true redemption was still possible. Today, March 20th, 2025, Kyle Norman sits in a Georgia state prison cell, a stark contrast to the luxurious hotel suites and tour buses that once defined his existence. Prison life has been a humbling experience for the former R&B star. Gone are the designer clothes, replaced by standard issue uniforms. Gone are the adoring fans, replaced by correctional officers and fellow inmates. Gone is the freedom that fame and fortune once afforded him. According to sources close to Kyle, his adjustment to incarceration has been difficult but transformative. The structured environment, mandatory sobriety, and separation from the trappings of his former life have forced a level of introspection that perhaps wasn't possible on the outside. Kyle has been using his time productively, said a family member who requested anonymity due to privacy concerns. He's participating in every rehabilitation program available to him. He's mentoring younger inmates. He's writing music that reflects his journey, not to excuse his actions, but to process them. This music, written behind bars with nothing but time and regret as inspiration, reportedly differs dramatically from the romantic ballads that made him famous. These new songs grapple with accountability, consequences, and the long road toward genuine redemption. While incarcerated, Kyle has maintained limited contact with the outside world through authorized phone calls and visits. His relationship with his former Jagged Edge groupmates remains complicated, a mixture of support, disappointment, and the complex emotions that come with watching someone you've known for decades self-destruct on a public stage. The group has continued performing without him, a painful reminder of the life and career he lost through his actions. His former fiancée, the victim of his assault, has moved on with her life. She has become an advocate for domestic violence survivors, transforming her traumatic experience into a platform for helping others escape abusive relationships.
I asked him to just lower his voice, and one thing just led to another.
You all got into a physical altercation. He hit you?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
What happened to me was terrible, she said in a 2023 interview. But I refuse to let it define me. I hope Kyle is getting the help he needs, but my focus is on healing myself and supporting other women who have been where I was. Prison has also affected Kyle's financial situation dramatically. The legal fees, restitution payments, and inability to perform or record have depleted much of the fortune he accumulated during Jagged Edge's heyday. The mansions and luxury cars are gone, sold to cover mounting debts. According to the Georgia Department of Corrections, Kyle is eligible for parole consideration in late 2025, though there's no guarantee it will be granted. His behavior in prison, participation in rehabilitation programs, and demonstrated remorse will all factor into that decision. What awaits Kyle Norman if and when he returns to society remains uncertain. The music industry can be forgiving of many transgressions, but domestic violence carries a particular stigma that may prove difficult to overcome. Some former fans express willingness to separate the art from the artist, continuing to enjoy Jagged Edge's music while acknowledging Kyle's serious transgressions. Others find themselves unable to listen to songs that once brought joy, now tainted by the knowledge of what happened behind closed doors. Industry insiders suggest that a comeback is not impossible, but would require genuine transformation and consistent demonstration of change. Not just words or promises, but sustained actions over time. The public can be forgiving, said a music executive who has worked with artists seeking redemption after controversy. But that forgiveness has to be earned through transparency, accountability, and visible change. It can't be manufactured by PR teams or comeback strategies. For now, Kyle Norman's story remains unfinished, a cautionary tale of how quickly success can unravel when internal demons go unchecked, when accountability is absent, and when the persona overtakes the person. His journey from R&B stardom to a prison cell serves as a stark reminder that talent and fame do not exempt anyone from consequences, and that the choices we make in our darkest moments can alter the trajectory of our lives forever. As we reflect on Kyle Norman's journey, from the heights of R&B stardom to the confines of a prison cell, we're left with more questions than answers. Was it fame that corrupted him? Were the warning signs visible long before that fateful night in January 2015? Could those around him have intervened earlier? Is redemption still possible after such a fall from grace? These questions extend far beyond one man's story. They touch on our culture's relationship with celebrity, our willingness to separate art from artists, and our capacity for forgiveness. The statistics are sobering. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 1 in 4 women will experience severe physical violence from an intimate partner in their lifetime. Behind each of these statistics is a human being. Someone's daughter, sister, mother, or friend. Kyle Norman's story isn't just about the fall of a celebrity. It's about the consequences of unchecked behavior, the damage one person can inflict on those who love them, and the long, difficult road to genuine accountability. As Kyle serves his sentence, as his former group mates continue performing without him, as his ex-fiancée rebuilds her life, we're left to ponder the fragility of success and the permanence of our choices. The songs that once filled stadiums now echo differently, remnants of a career and legacy forever altered by actions that can't be undone. I want to hear from you. Do you believe in second chances for people who have committed serious crimes like domestic violence? Can Kyle Norman ever truly redeem himself? Should he be welcomed back into the music industry after serving his time? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, behind every headline, behind every mugshot, behind every fall from grace, there are real people, real pain, and real lessons that we all would do well to heed. This is the true story of Kyle Norman, a cautionary tale of how quickly everything can change when the demons we refuse to face finally catch up with us.